Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Penn Vicarage on this Monday morning. Lovely to see you, and thank you very much indeed for being with us for our Bible thought for today. Friends, we're in Psalm 91. It's a well-known psalm, actually, really well-known psalm. It's quoted a lot in the, if you ever been to the Compline service, bits of between that. But anyway, Psalm 91, here goes. You who live in the shelter of the Most High, who abide in the shadow of the Almighty, will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and buckler. You will not fear the terror of night, or the arrow that flies by day, or the pestilence that stalks in darkness, or the destruction that wastes at noonday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. You will only look with your eyes and see the punishment of the wicked. Because you've made the Lord your refuge, the Most High your dwelling place, no evil shall befall you, no scourge shall come near your tent. But he will command his angels concerning you, to guard you in all your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, so you will not dash your foot against a stone. You will tread on the adder and the lion and the adder, the young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot. Those who love me I will deliver. I will protect those who know my name. When they call to me, I will answer them. I'll be with them in trouble. I'll rescue them and honour them. With long life I will satisfy them and show them my salvation. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, friends, let's look first at the context of this psalm. Basically, the context is time of great danger. We don't know what the danger is, and as you can imagine, theologians have debated and discussed and speculated for many. We don't actually know what the context is, but basically you can see that there's great danger going on here. That's the danger. And if you were hearing that and thinking, I'm sure I've heard those words before somewhere, you may well have done, because in verse, these are the words actually, some of the words actually quoted by Satan, interesting enough, when Jesus is in the desert being tempted. I think that's in Lent you might have heard about this. When Jesus is tempted in the desert, and the devil's trying to persuade him that there's another way of doing it rather than dying for the world, and that you can show off and dazzle people and throw yourself off the temple because. How does it say it, Simon? Because he will command his angels continue to guard you on the ways, so you will not dash your foot against a stone. That's quoted from there. Of course, Satan's got it completely wrong, because Satan's trying to encourage Jesus to win people over by showing off. But the real context of this is that it's a time of great danger. So if you've heard those words before, that's where you've heard them. But the real context, as I say, this is a psalm really for when people are in great danger. And the structure of the psalm, essentially, is in three bits. Verses 1 and 2 are about my refuge, if you like, okay. Verses 3 to 13 are what you might call your refuge. So it's a whole series of things, with dangers you might encounter, and what God is. And then finally at the end, in verses 14 onwards, God replies and says what he is, okay. So three sections. There's the kind of opening bit, which is my refuge, all about my refuge in God. Then there's 3 to 13, which is all about different dangers that people can encounter and who God is. And finally, in the last three verses, verse 14 to the end, we have God's response. So, taking it one at a time, firstly, there's the section at the beginning, which you might call my refuge. Those who dwell in the shelter of the Most High and the shadow of the Almighty. There's interesting what he describes God to be. That God is both Most High, so he's the highest. So there's no kind of he is the Most High. So he really is above all others, and he's almighty. In other words, God has almighty power. Nothing is more powerful for God, and nothing is too difficult for God. So we see God to be the Most High. So there's no one higher, nothing or no one higher, and we have God as the Almighty too. And because of that, that whoever wrote it, so we don't know who it is, describes God as my refuge, which is a place where you can go when you're in danger. A refuge is a place where you go from bad weather or something. So God is a refuge and also fortress. Fortress kind of implies battle, implies warrior and fight and that type of stuff. So a fortress is a strong place to go in times of, in the middle of when times are difficult. So in the first couple of verses, the psalmist, the guy that wrote it, is saying, because God is Most High, he's the highest, and God is almighty. Therefore, God is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. So in the first couple of verses, you get description of God as being almighty and most high, and because of that, he can be our refuge and our fortress. Okay, he's got the power to do it. Then in the next few verses, we hear, verses 3 to 13, we hear about a whole lot of dangers that people can encounter. He talks about the hunters, the snare of the hunter, or the snare of the fowler, as it calls it. So it's trickery. It's being saved from the hunter's trap. It's being saved from trickery. He talks about a deadly pestilence. That's presumably things like illness and sickness and things like that as well. He talks about the terror by night, but also the arrow by day. So it's kind of the dangers of the day, but also the dangers of the night as well. And he also talks about 1,000 falling by your right hand. So it's times of national calamity. So he runs through all these different things that can go wrong so things like war and disease and national tragedy and day and night and all these kind of things, that can go wrong. And he describes them here in verses 3 to 13. But in response, we found out who God is. And again, the psalmist uses some fantastic analogy. He talks about like a mother hen, really, but nonetheless, under his wings you will find refuge, a bit like a mother hen protecting her chicks. In a sense, he talks about, you'll find refuge under his wings. It's that lovely picture there. He talks about God being a shield and buckler. So, think that a shield is used to kind of protect yourself. And God can be, and if we put our trust in God, then God is our shield. Okay. He also talks about no evil shall come near your tent. A tent is a place we can live, but it's not a very strong place to live. Actually, it's not like a house or something like that. A tent isn't very strong, but protection. When you are resting, when you're resting. Okay. He talks about angels bearing you up. Again, it's a lovely picture of. An angel is a messenger, but an angel here it implies kind of God's work as the angels will protect you. And we talk about having guardian angels, especially children have guardian angels. And here we have to about the psalmist talks about angels protecting us too. But he also talks about because we have God as our strength, we shall tread on the young lion and the adder. That's where, isn't it? Because the God is our strength. It implies that we'll be able to tread on dangerous beasts and this sort of stuff as well. So here we hear verses 3 to 13. We have a whole lot of different dangers that people can encounter, and in response, what happens if we have God as our strength? That He will save us from the snare of the hunter. He will save us from the deadly pestilence. He'll save us from the arrow by day, the terror by night, and national catastrophe, that sort of stuff. If we put our trust in Him. And then in the end, in the last 3 verses, we have God's response. And it's almost like, God's been listening while the person's been talking about how good it is to have God as your strength. And God responds. And God's response is fascinating. He says all sorts of things that God says he will do. In verse 14, he says, I will deliver. And in verse 14, he also says, I will protect. In verses 15, he says, I will answer them. In verse 15, he says, I will be with them. In verse 15, he also says, I will rescue them. And in verse 15, he also says, I will honour them. In verse 16, he says, I will satisfy them. And in verse 16, he also says, I will show them my salvation. So in response to this person who's saying, in this time of great danger and trouble, I put my trust in you, O God. God says in response, I will deliver. I will protect. I will answer. I will be with them. I will rescue them. I will honour them. I will satisfy them. And I will show them my salvation. That is our God, and that's what God does for us in times of great danger. So, my friends, lovely Psalm 91, 3 sections. First, he's talking about because God is almighty and most high, he's got the power, we can have him as our refuge and our fortress. Then he goes on in verses 3 to 13 to describe a whole lot of dangers which can befall us, but actually who God is in response. God is our one who shields us with his wings. God's the one who is our shield and our buckler. God is the one who sends angels to bear us up. And God's the one who will give us the strength to tread on the young lion and the adder. And then finally at the end we have what God says to us. I will deliver, I will protect, I will answer, I'll be with them, I'll be with you. I will rescue them, I will honour them, I will satisfy them, and I will show them my salvation. And I think that's enough to be going with today. My friends, God bless you. Have a lovely day.